When she was in middle school, Konoha Sato wrote a story and gave the lovely heroine her name. It was a love magic fantasy adventure. Her mother barged in the room, scolding her because she wasn't studying. And Konoha didn't care. She spent her days writing her story non-stop, believing that one day she'd be summoned to another world. She didn't know when that would happen. So she decided to leave a letter in this one while she could. Writing this story was practice for when she went to another world. 10 years later, she'd get a phone call from her mother on her way back from work, asking about that very letter she wrote. Since Konoha didn't live at her parents' home anymore, her mother was looking to clean everything out of her room. And Konoha didn't mind. She had already taken everything she needed. But while remembering what that note was, Truck-kun claimed another victim. Recalling the story set in the magical kingdom, lived a heroine, a count's daughter named Konoha. Basically a self-insert. When her younger sister's potential fiancé, a young man named Genoford, visits, she meets him by chance in the garden. And for the both of them, it's love at first sight. But standing in the path of the two heroes was Konoha's younger sister, Iana. Iana was known for being a villainess to her core. Her jealousy, especially towards her sister, often got her in trouble. She found fault with everyone and had a terrible reputation. Iana will cause trouble. That was the reason Konoha and Genoford weren't allowed to meet openly, and also the reason they couldn't announce their betrothal. Even so, Konoha loved her younger sister. But Iana, being so spiteful, harassed Konoha in every way she could think of. Eventually, even her life became a target. One day, Iana received a book called The Dark History that caused whomever read it to collapse, and she cackled, knowing she would finally kill her big sister. However, the book would accidentally open onto her eyes, and as she squealed in anguish, thoughts and memories poured into her mind of the real-world Konoha's letters and memories. The letter read, "Dear Father, Mother, I am no longer in this world. This is because I have a destiny to fulfill." The conclusion of the letter was her realizing she awakened as a saint. That would be the beginning of her tragic fate. Then, coming to, she'd be confronted by the knights. She remembered this scene. Iana would be under arrest for attempted murder of Konoha Magnolia. But Iana was the name of the villainess of the story she made up. Since she was Konoha Sato, she wondered why they were calling her Iana, the antagonist's name. She remembered being on the phone with her mother on the way home from work. Getting thrown in the slammer, she finally realized she's been reincarnated. This world was a product of her imagination that she created throughout middle and high school. In the prologue of The Dark History, Konoha, the heroine who had the same name as her, saved the world with many handsome men protecting her all the while. And now the person she reincarnated into was the heroine's enemy, the evil younger sister, Iana. Konoha rushed into the cell to embrace her. She was so worried having heard the police arrested her sister and held out her hand to bring her home. Real Konoha couldn't believe the Konoha she wrote was in front of her. She smelled nice and her voice was so pretty. She gushed over fictional Konoha's angelicness. Rushing over and pulling out his sword was Genoford Dandelion. Iana was shocked seeing the main hero was here. Gino told Konoha to stand back, asking why Iana hadn't been killed yet. But of course, with the way Konoha was written, she'd always defend her beloved little sister. Still, he'd point his blade at her, reminding Konoha of the night Iana snuck an assassin into her carriage at the ball, paid a servant to poison the drinks, spread baseless rumors throughout the manor that caused trouble, and tried to destroy her mind using the Dark History. Also, she switched out Konoha's horse for a cow. Dang, real Konoha was kinda feeling proud for writing all that, but now wondered what she did in her past life to deserve this villainous reincarnation. After being forced to watch the lovey-dovey protagonists, she was sent to an area on the border that the Count's family owned, where she was to stay under confinement for 3 months. She was thankful that fictional Konoha was so merciful towards her. This was a good opportunity for her to get used to this world. However, she then remembered Iana was supposed to be killed in confinement by a man hired by the Count's family. Uh-oh, she was destined for death. When that man was a child, he was sold as a slave, and Konoha saved him. He's been in love with Konoha ever since, and hoped that he could protect her. Being escorted around the manor, she'd quickly find all the servants were scared of her until she was introduced to the dazzling 17-year-old Sol Nemophila, her personal attendant, and the man who would kill her. She wondered if anyone was stupid enough to live with someone they knew would kill them. But of course there wasn't. As he approached, she stepped back. She cried internally, not wanting to die. He was both aloof and cordial, offering to get her a warm drink. And with him gone, she plopped onto the table to breathe a sigh of relief, but then remembered she wasn't safe. If she wanted to survive, she had to remember all the world building for the story. This world didn't just have humans, but also angels, demons, ninjas, and samurai. That aside, she needed to figure out something or she'd be killed. And while contemplating what to do, Soul returned with a knife behind his back. She cut off his attack to tell him she wanted to write her sister a letter. She was so scared because his footsteps didn't make a sound. She giggled and made pleasantries as he served her tea, thinking about how she had to make choices carefully to avoid death. From now on, she'd live as Iana, the normal daughter of a count, and marry some bland nobleman, and live peacefully. But first, she needed to avoid Soul killing her. The first thing she needed to do was show that she approved of Jinaford and Konoha's marriage, then apologize for all her offensiveness and distance herself from the dark history. While she wrote vigorously, Soul contemplated what she was thinking. Later, at Count Magnolia's residence, Gino looked at the letter that read, "I offer my congratulations on your future wedding." He knew this would certainly make Konoha happy, but he tore it up and threw it in the fire, thinking the contents were insincere. He couldn't believe Iana would have a change of heart now. Soul would point out his interactions with her as odd. She reacted to the slightest hint of bloodlust, and she had remarkable instinct. He believed they couldn't let their guard down, and surmised that was why Gino ordered her assassination under confinement. Soul came back to Iana, explaining Konoha was away on a trip with their uncle, as the excuse for why he didn't obtain a reply to her letter. Iana was wary, of course, because she didn't remember writing anything about an uncle. But then, it started to come back to her. When Konoha rescued Soul from the slave market, their uncle was there with her. She remembered the kind words Konoha told Soul the day she saved him, and recited them herself. "You're not a slave anymore. Soul, your beautiful hands aren't meant for dirty work." He was stunned. He questioned how she knew those words. But she didn't mean to blurt them out loud, and decided to flee back to her room, trying to remember more of the story. It came to her that their uncle was plotting to capture Konoha. Their uncle suffered unrequited love for their mother in their youth, and all he could do was bottle his feelings up. But when Konoha grew up, she looked exactly like her, and his twisted passion overflowed once again. He would lure Konoha to an abandoned village, wound Jinoford, and attempt to force himself onto her. But the shock would release the magic hidden away within her, and their uncle would be defeated. Then, to find a way to reawaken Jinoford, she gets caught up in trouble all over the world. Iana began to worry about her sister and Gino, but then remembered her own life was on the line. She needed to worry about herself first. But then, thinking about how much Konoha was worried about her, she felt she needed to do something. She stormed out of her room, trying to tell someone to get a horse to the capital, but was distraught with the fact that no one would even look at her. And then Soul approached. He told her the other servants had all their own work to do, and asked that she stop behaving like she did in the capital. She tried to object at first, but then walked away, remembering he was right, and that this was the world she created in her own dark history. In the real world, this was all a fantasy. She never considered that it was actually real for the characters. She was now bearing the responsibility for all her fantasies. She freaked out while riding on a horse. Even knowing in Iana's backstory, she should be proficient, but in her past life, she was terrified. Arriving at the church, Konoha was charmed by the historic site. Her uncle explained it had been a long time since his village was abandoned, and told Gino to leave his sword behind, since this place was sacred. Iana believed she'd make it in time. She thought about how she always wanted to be like Konoha, beautiful and pure, a girl loved by so many, with special powers and circumstances, being unrealistically dramatic. Seeing such a heroine in distress fired her up. But here, everything was real. She didn't want the wounds in the story to become wounds in reality. The uncle lunged his blade towards Gino, telling him to die. And Iana burst in at the nick of time and whacked him away with a sack of rocks she picked up earlier. She was glad she made it. Gino would be a little caught off guard, hearing Iana telling him to look after Konoha. Soon after, the uncle tried to attack her instead, but Soul would come to the rescue. He'd say, "Should the daughter of a noble be confronting a ruffian? It's quite unseemly, Lady Iana." He was so dashing in her eyes. She pulled away, and we learned he'd been following her since she left the manor. She felt guilt knowing the characters committed crimes that she had written in this story. Perhaps a bit self-indulgent, but she wanted to feel the weight of this responsibility. Gino would approach her later, asking if she knew about her uncle's fixation with Konoha, and if that was why she was protecting her in secret. He believed she didn't want him to become Konoha's fiancé to agitate her uncle's feelings, and figured that was why she opposed their marriage. Real Konoha knew that wasn't it, and that his naive interpretation was so far off, but maybe that meant she successfully changed the dark history. She felt relief, knowing she no longer had to die. Sol then came by to thank her as well, coldly saying he wouldn't have been able to resist killing anyone who harmed Konoha. This event was bad in a new way. In the story, this incident caused Konoha's magic to awaken, and that allowed her to escape the disaster that had befall her later. But since Iana saved her, that hasn't happened. So, if something happened to Konoha and Sol suspected her, he'd definitely kill her. She had to protect Konoha from now on. 1 month after becoming Iana, she was still having a rough time adjusting. She gushed over the beautiful view of Barbara Forest, but suddenly felt like she'd forgotten something really important. Arriving at the location, Konoha brightly greeted her. They were going to see the flowers today. Gino gently grabbed Iana, trying to lead her to where they were going, and she'd stumble on a rock so he romantically held her? This was her ideal high-spec man. Sol entered scene, telling her not to cause trouble for Jennifer, and that he'd show her the way from here, offering his own hand. His icy gaze was so cold. If Jennifer was the Flame Knight, then Sol was an Ice Butler. Sol was a lonely assassin and beautiful as a doll. For Konoha's sake, he's taken on the appearance of a butler to keep an eye on her. As he told Iana there was no need for thanks because this was simply his duty, she thought of him as her ideal form, the man she poured all her aesthetic sense into. He's super scary to her, but she somehow found that appealing. Dang, I think a lot of my viewers would like him. That aside, she made up her mind. She'd protect Konoha so that nothing bad happens to her, and she'll survive too. Alright, this is a fun start to another villainous anime. Wow, we got 3 this season. I don't know if I'll like this one more or the punching villainous. Definitely more than the voracious villainous, but I still like that one too. Subscribe to keep up with future parts, and hype up the video or I'll stop covering it. For now though, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea, and I'll see you all in the next one.